Hey everyone, and welcome to The Rational Republican, a podcast where we look at complex issues facing us here in Oregon and around the nation. We'll try to address issues from a nonpartisan perspective and view our disagreements through a lens of respect rather than tribalism or divisiveness. I'm James Ball. This is Nick Perlasky.
Hey listeners, how we doing?
Today's podcast is brought to you by ProLift Garage Doors. ProLift is your one-stop shop for residential and small commercial garage doors, from openers, springs, and rollers to full reinstalls. They offer same-day service on all garage door repairs with no extra charge for evenings or weekends. Serving the greater Portland metro area, call today and set up your free estimate at 503-558-6349 or at proliftdoors.com/Portland. Again, that's 503-558-6349 or proliftdoors.com/Portland. On this episode of the podcast, we're delighted to welcome Mr. Stephen Lloyd. Stephen is the chairman of the Young Republicans of Oregon and, until last week, the chairman of the Multnomah County Republican Party. And so that's one of the things we were going to talk about is he was recently recalled. He spent, about 6 months as the chairman?
About that.
Yeah.
6 months there, and it aged you 6 years? 60 years?
I would say it definitely did age me.
So why don't we start out? Would you just give a 2-minute bio, who you are, how you came to Oregon, involvement in politics, what got you involved in politics, and we'll go from there.
Yeah, thank you very much. I appreciate that opportunity. So my name is Stephen Lloyd, and I grew up as a military brat. We bounced from military base to military base, and I got to see a lot of parts of the world. And because of that, growing up in a military family, your life is a little bit different, and I feel like it was slightly charmed because of that. And so after my dad left the military, we kind of still kept that tradition of moving about once every 2 years. And as we did, we moved to places like Idaho and into Florida and different places like that. And so the idea of rural-urban divide, you can definitely see the difference there. But after I graduated high school, I worked in the oil and gas industry, and I did that for about give or take about 10 to 12 years. And then I got married, and I asked my wife, where would you like to live? I drug you all over some of the most desolate place on the planet. Where would you like to live? And she said, well, I want to live by the ocean, and I want to live by the mountains. And we looked at a number of places, and they were all on the West Coast. And so I said, California is off the table. So why don't we go check out Oregon and Washington? So we took a little trip, and this was obviously pre-COVID. And Portland had this really cool spirit about it, really interesting. And we went up to Seattle, and Seattle, it was a little too much, a little too heavy for me. And so we decided that we were going to start looking for work here. And so I did. And then I realized that there was two different parties in the world. There was the Republican Party and there was the Democrat Party. Before that, living in the Midwest, primarily within the circles that I traveled, you were always a Republican, right? Anything else, and it was unheard of. So I came to Portland, and it was during that Newt Buehler election when I saw an article posted by the past chair of the Multnomah County Republican Party, basically giving all these reasons why we didn't win. And I took a little bit of offense to that. And it was because, no one ever called me. Nobody ever asked my opinion. Nobody ever decided that they were going to, ask me who I was voting for. And I felt like it was because, the Republican Party wasn't doing the work. And so basically, at that point, I wrote a nasty gram to the Republican Party, and from then on, I was working within the party structure for about 2 years, and the vacancy opened up for the chairman didn't want to run again, and I always grew up in a family where if there's a mess, if you see it, you've got to clean it up. So I felt like it was my opportunity to come in and to serve the people of Multnomah County and hopefully the state. Because I feel like with better representation, we can give more people in Oregon a better life to look forward to.
And I just got to brag on you a little bit. I mean, you took the Young Republicans from what was basically a defunct organization that existed in name only, and basically turned it around into a nationally recognized organization that holds events and meetings and gets people involved. And so just props to you for doing that.
Golf clap for Stephen. I'll say, first off, you're giving way too much credit to the YouTube people. There's going to be like 13 people that watch this. We're just at the start of the YouTube phase. You keep looking to camera doing this like the Jim from The Office kind of thing. With the, like there's like a cutaway or something going on. That's probably not going to happen tonight. Second off, sorry, I was one of the people making calls for Newt. So if we missed you, that was my bad. Newt Bueller, friend of the podcast, been on here, but it's probably why I lost. We didn't give you a call. My bad.
It was me specifically that did the whole thing. Yeah, I just
the one vote that would have changed everything.
That's right.
But third of all, let me just ask, because I honestly did not know that about you, that you kind of bounced around to see so many different parts of the country. I myself, Oregon's like the 8th state I've lived in, and I got here and I saw, okay, this is as blue gets. The Democrats all up and down the board. And okay, my days in politics are over because there's just no avenue for any kind of Republicans going forward. And you get here and you find out that, well, in fact, there are a lot of serious, credible Republicans who hold office in some way, shape, or form. There's a lot more who would like to be involved. And I feel like that had to be kind of a coming to Jesus moment for you, where you get to see and you say, hey, wait, there's work that I can do for people of my political ilk.
Well, definitely. And the other thing, too, is I kind of feel like the Democrat Party is kind of lazy here. And it's not a personal attack on you guys out there. It's the fact that they've won for so long, they've never had to run a competitive race.
Yeah,
exactly.
They take it for granted.
And so I feel like where we have, a cluster of really excited, really motivated individuals, there's a chance. And everybody loves an underdog, right? Everybody wants to Cinderella man this thing.
And, I've said this. I actually mentioned before the podcast, I was talking with Willamette Week earlier today about the recall election, which I'm sure we'll get to in a minute. But one of the things I said, like the Democratic Party here in Oregon has overreached so far. They are doing such a poor job managing the state. I mean, we're in downtown Portland right now, and you just walk outside, and there's homelessness everywhere. The Democrats have controlled this city forever. They've controlled the governor's office for 30 years, and yet everything seems to be getting worse. We pay exorbitant taxes. We don't get anything for it. It's just all churned up in bureaucracy and government jobs and inefficiencies. And even Kate Brown's COVID orders are being challenged by Democrats at this point. I mean, there is so much turmoil going on, and Democrats doing things just, it's like I said, blatant overreach. All we have to do, I think, to win some of those middle voters is not be crazy. And apparently that bar is sometimes a bit too hard for us. So I don't believe I said it like that. Please don't print anything. But just going to this recall. So obviously I've been a supporter. I voted for you. I think you did a fantastic job.
Thank you.
And just sort of my interpretation of what happened is I felt like there's this old guard of Multnomah County Republicans who kind of felt like they could control you as a young, up and comer, that they could have you as their sock puppet. And when they realized they couldn't, they flipped on you and then kicked you out. Does that kind of sound, without getting anybody in trouble, I guess?
If you would have, let me know ahead of time by that description, I think that I could have done a better job.
Sorry about that.
in defending against what did happen, because I
don't think it even came to me until just thinking about it after the fact. I was like, oh yeah, these same people who supported you 6 months ago are now coming after you, and all of their claims are just completely out the window. Anyway, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, the thing is I was pretty consistent from the beginning about where we were at as a party. There was a lot of work that needed to be done structurally. There was a lot of communication and information that needed to be passed and work that needed to be done just on a structural level. And, the issue, basically when you come to the table and you do an inventory and you realize what you really have as a party is a lot of work when you start, talking about who needs, basically what we need to do in order to make that happen. Some people shy away and some people double down, and those individuals that wanted to do the work in the beginning, I guess they decided that they didn't want to do it any longer.
So this was my takeaway from the recall vote, because there was not to get into hardcore specifics, but there was a case for you and there was a case against you. We went into the meeting and we heard for 20 minutes, the first 20 minutes, the case against you. If I had no idea who you were, and I admittedly walked into that meeting with my mind made up, but if I had no idea who you were, what was going on, the whole case against you make me like you more. Like, already my vote would have been cast as no, please don't recall this person, because everybody's complaint was, well, he's trying to make us do stuff and he wants us to actually have responsibilities and get things done. And it's like, wait, why are you, like, this was the second meeting on a weeknight that these folks had shown up to. They're willing to give their time. They're willing to give the time, talent, and treasure. I think people in that organization give all three of those. And now you're saying, okay, well, I'm still going to ask you to do that, but I want to hold you accountable. I want to have some metrics. I want to see, what you can do. And then when you're done with that, what more we can do, and let's keep going. And that apparently merits being recalled as the chairman of the largest county party here in the state of Oregon.
Well, it is really, really amazing when you decide to take stock and basically take measure of what the party is currently doing in order to measure against that after you've set a set of goals and done, some really basic goal setting. Some people get offended about it because it kind of makes all of the illusions of what they said that they were doing disappear. And people don't like that. People like to keep up an act. And it was really interesting talking about basically their reason for wanting to get rid of me. I think at the end of the day, it boiled down to a couple individuals. They didn't like the leadership style or the direction the party was going, and I'm really proud that they decided to work so hard and diligently in order to do something for the party that they felt strongly about. I just wish that they would have done a better job.
Different avenue.
Yeah, like supporting special election candidates or
Right.
training PCPs.
Well, here's another thing that I was thinking is what's the purpose of a political party? And if you ask me, what's the purpose of a political party? It's to win elections. Like, that's it, period. To win elections. Everything else is to win elections. All the fairs, all the rifle raffles, the meetings, the bylaws, all of that is to win elections. And if you read the ORP bylaw header of what is the purpose of the party, it's got 7 or 8 things listed, most of which have to do with supporting the platform and informing our elected leaders what they should be voting on.
Right.
Neither of which it does very well. But when you look at the purpose of a party, and if you believe that the purpose of the party is to support the platform and like do these other things, then winning elections becomes secondary. And so I think that's part of what may have been gotten into, I mean, not so much the people that spearheaded this thing. I think that they had vendettas and there was other issues going on there, but like the people who voted for the recall, I think what may have been going through their heads, this is just me speculating, is they want to promote the party platform. And the party platform has some, in my opinion, pretty awful things in it.
Well, in our opinion, we did a 2-hour podcast. We killed a bottle of scotch going through that and just eviscerated the party platform.
Listeners, if you want to go listen to
shameless
that,
plug.
The Oregon ORP Party Platform is what it's called.
So, and I guess I'll just add for the list for the viewers that Stephen keeps cutting to, which is awesome. This is going to be the thing that like ups our YouTube count, is like
the eye contact.
Yeah,
exactly.
That's right. This is the content. They love the content. To just give, for somebody that's listening and or watching who is unfamiliar with the situation, you're what, 30 years old or something like that?
I'm 35.
35 years old. You're young, and you got elected chairman of the county party, of Multnomah County Republican Party, and you are, at least in the eyes of a number of the more codgerly MAGA types of the MCRP, you're woke. You're moderate and squishy because you said heinous crimes like we should have more people attend our meetings and we should have people in who aren't 100% doctrinaire by the book conservatives, and that seemed to get you in hot water. Did I miss something? Did I leave anything out?
Well, I just want to touch on the fact that, first off, the party platform has changed hundreds of times.
True. Yeah.
It's changed a lot since 1868, I believe it was. And the things that the founders of this party started with might possibly be things that the current members of the party disagree with. And I'm not saying that as a negative thing towards the Republican Party, but what I'm saying is that our party and our platform changes for a number of different reasons throughout history, for a lot of different reasons. And the thing is while I support 95% of the things that are inside the party platform, there are some natural grievances that I think that we need to rectify. And I know this is going to sound super nitpicky, but we have as a state GOP, we have a party plank that talks about foreign policy. Mm-hmm. So tell me this. What sense does it make for the GOP to be talking about their support of foreign policy? Like, what is Oregon doing in order to support the Israelis or
Taiwan,
to go against to protect
Myanmar
Taiwan
coup,
or to like? What does the Republican Party of Oregon have to say about Chinese interventionism creating islands in the like? It's not our business. That's not within our purview. And the other thing is, I think it almost walks that line of being unconstitutional because we're not supposed to have contracts and contracts with other countries as a state. And I just think that that's separation of power stuff. And there are a number of technical things within our party bylaws that need to be addressed. But it's interesting that it turned into discussing the party bylaws became one of those pivotal things that do you totally and unquestionably support the party bylaws? And the fact is, as Republicans and as rational thinking individuals,
shameless plug,
we should never this is for you, YouTube. We should never be unquestioning about anything.
Yeah. 100%. Yeah, and to your point, every 2 years that platform changes. Mm-hmm. And, it doesn't change a lot, but it does over time, it does change. But I always say I'm about 80% of the platform.
Yeah.
I would have given myself 60. Y'all are both better conservatives.
60? Well, I mean, if you go through it, I think it's, I don't know. There's some good stuff in there.
Can we talk about that briefly?
Sure, go ahead.
This idea of conservatism. Mm-hmm. Be honest. What has the Republican Party been able to conserve since Reagan? No, I'm asking you guys to think about it too, because the fact is we can say that we're conservatives, but what have we been actively been able to conserve? Is it the fact that state lands, have we been able to save more of those against the federal government? Is it, are we talking about like more states' rights? Are we conserving that? I would say no. Is it the ability to have more privacy in our homes? I would say no. What about internet privacy for us young people?
Yeah.
What about that? Would you guys like a little bit of internet privacy? Is that something that should be conserved? I mean, what have we legitimately, measurably been able to conserve?
Well, it's the nature
majority in the state house.
Yeah, right. Well, it's the nature of government to grow, and it's the nature of government to be more and more expansive. Once the government takes power, once it takes money, once it takes control, it's very, very rare that it gives that up. And, COVID's a great example of that. And, whether or not, whatever your opinions on Kate Brown and how she's handled this, this was supposed to be a 2-week pause that lasted now 14 months. So once the government gets their fingers into the economy and says, you guys need to shut down, and just takes this authoritarian, dare I say, fascist control of the state, it has a really hard time letting go. And it takes conservatives to push back on that. And, this is why I don't support the mask mandate. Not because I think masks are a bad idea or because I think that it's such this great inconvenience to wear a mask, but it's just that little teeny prick at your freedoms that the government has decided that this is the thing that they're going to start pushing. And as conservatives, I think it's our duty to push back on that stuff. When the government starts to overreach and grabs policies and your freedoms that you don't want to give up, we need to push back.
Civil liberties only ever come one or two at a time. That's a Toby's Eagle line in the West Wing. I will, if I may, do something I've never done on this podcast before, and that's make the case for Kate Brown. I
thought you were going to say make the case for the Oregon Ducks.
No, I'm definitely we're not doing that. We're already recording, and I guess the YouTube people can't see, but this whole wall over here is just duck green, and it's so horrid. It's so ugly. My eyes burn.
The wife picked the color, not me. So anyway, go ahead.
You could have married an interior decorator or something, man. I just throwing that out there.
Ouch.
Yeah,
you're
Rebecca,
lucky she doesn't. She doesn't listen to these anymore.
I was going to say that, so please don't hate me because your wife is so lovely. But I will say, at the start of the pandemic, I'd rather governments at every level overreact than underreact because we didn't know how serious this was. If this really were like, this crazy, everybody who gets it is going to, half the people are going to die. This is like Stephen King, The Stand, or something like that. You want to overreact rather than underreact. Where I will criticize the government is not that the 2 weeks turned into 2 months, turned into 6 months. Now, okay, we eased restrictions, and then we put them back in the wintertime. My gripe is that the government didn't learn anything. And this is, I guess maybe I'm not a great conservative because I care less about the size of government than the efficacy of government. I'm fine if we have a big government if it's good at the things that it does and it knows to stay out of the things that it does not do well. And this was a great example of a big government doing something poorly. For the last 14 months, we've had so many unnecessary restrictions. So many businesses have closed, a lot of it in a lot of cases for good. I think there's been a number of you can look at the data to see rates of suicide, rates of mental health issues, rates of abuse have all skyrocketed. And the government says, well, it's all in the name of coronavirus. It's like, well, but the whole basic thing for you as a government is to serve and protect, and you're doing neither of these things at this moment. You've got yourself with the blinders on, with the COVID blinders on, and I think they just did a poor job of that. So I feel like that's probably a whole nother podcast, is what is the role and the size and the scope of the government. But I'll say for where we're at right now, we're starting to come out of it. Election season's starting to ramp up.
Coincidence?
Oh yeah, coincidence? Oh my, is this what's happening? I saw 2 potential candidates for governor in the same night last week, and election season is here. What do we have to look forward to? How can Republicans win elections if we have people like Jimbo and me are shunned all the time? I'll show you some of the Facebook comments, man. It's not great. And you're kind of in the same boat. We have us lonely 3 just. Democrats don't like us because we're Republicans, and a lot of the Republicans don't like us because we're not Republican enough. Like, where do you go if you're a young person?
Well, I think that there's a lot of places that you can go. I think that there's a lot of organizations that are looking for young individuals to get involved, and dare I say, the Young Republicans of Oregon is always looking for more individuals to come help out.
YRO.org? What's the site?
It's the YRO.org. Yeah.
Nice.
Awesome. I was just guessing. I honestly didn't know that.
Thank you very much for the shameless plug. I appreciate that.
All about that in this podcast.
And with that being said, I think that the Republican Party shouldn't be a place where we try to define individuals, okay, as being Republicans or super conservatives or rhinos or any one of those things. If there are things that we can work on together, if you're an individual that says, James, he thinks that the Second Amendment is great, and you happen to be Second Amendment, you might say, well, I think that maybe we shouldn't have artillery pieces as citizens, and I might be a Second Amendment individual who loves firearm collecting, whatever it is. As long as each of us agree that we don't want to ban our constitutional rights, then there should be some middle ground that we can work on. Our constitutional rights should be so sacred amongst Americans where, as long as you're not trying to actively take rights away from each other, you should be able to work together on things.
And one of the things that we try to do in this podcast is have discussions without getting angry. Mm-hmm. And I think that that's really important on stuff like you can have 3 people who support the Second Amendment. One person thinks maybe you shouldn't have artillery weapons. Another person is like, if I want a nuke, I'm going to go buy one. And,
The Ron Swanson approach.
Right. I mean,
80%, you can do an 80% on that.
80. But like being able to have those discussions, but then at the end of the day, go about and vote for the person and work together and not get bogged down by it. And that's what irritates me so much about the Multnomah County Republicans and even the ORP at this point is like, yeah, if you don't support I heard this a number of times during that recall meeting where if you don't support the platform, you should find another party.
Well,
like,
that's really
no.
So let's do a little pushback against that.
Okay, go ahead.
So the individuals who showed up for that recall meeting, I believe that number, it made up, I'm going to say around 70% of the members of that party, and just over half voted against me. Mm-hmm. For the individuals that did support me but couldn't have been there, I got a number of emails, a number of phone calls that said, unfortunately, I can't be there. That's not the whole party. And even those individuals that did ultimately end up voting to recall me, a lot of those people were really close and on the fence. And the issue is I think that the majority of people are too busy, or they're working too hard, or they're not in the right cycle in their life that they can give up time to the party. But that doesn't mean that there aren't millions of people in Oregon that are just like you and me who are trying to, make their little slice of heaven a little bit better.
And this is something that a person who shall remain nameless, because he's never said this publicly to my knowledge, but other friend of the pod has said a couple of times, you don't have that problem on the Democratic side, because if you're a Democrat, a lot of times you're a teacher, you're a public employee, you have PERS benefits, you have and politics means you have a job or you don't. Politics means you get a retirement or you don't. And so on the Democratic side, this is their life. Politics for a lot of them is their life. And where on the Republican side, you've got families, you got jobs, you got businesses, and it's just we're not as much, just not in that same mindset where politics is absolutely everything for us.
So I'll say
you're going to push back. Go ahead.
I'm going to push back because I think if you're on the left, you might think that it's your life. I think there's one party that's trying to make sure PERS survives the next 3 decades, and it is not the Democrats. There is one party that's trying to make sure those teachers and those public employees actually do have the retirement benefits that they were promised, and it is not the Democrats in the state of Oregon. I tell you what. But I think going back to your point a little bit, I think this is for as I'm sure gut-wrenching of a process as it was, and obviously the result that was not something that you were hoping for. This is kind of the beauty of what Republican politics is, because we, honest to God, are the big tent party. Mm-hmm. We really, really are the party that does embrace all spectrums of right-leaning individuals, that looks for the best possible candidates to run for office, the best possible candidates to vote for office, the best possible candidates to donate to for office. Whereas on the Democrats, you're stuck with supporting like Kate Brown and Shemia Fagan, who are objectively bad people at their. I mean, seriously, Kate Brown has approval ratings in the 30s. She's one of the bottom 5 governors in the country. And if you're a Democrat, you have to line up behind that and just be like, no, she's our gal or whatever. And it's just what Oregonian would look around in the middle of a pandemic and think that we would not be better off having a medical doctor in the form of Newt Bueller at the helm right now? We obviously, and you can't see something like coronavirus coming, but we are, as Republicans, I never voted for Donald Trump. I don't support the man's policies, and I think that a lot of stuff is pretty out there in terms of the active lies and treason that he's put into the world. But there's a number of those individuals who are members of the party that I think are wonderful people. You can support Donald Trump and still be a good person, and at the end of the day, somebody like me, who's very anti-MAGA and squishy and modern, all the fun adjectives that have been hurled my way, I still row in the same boat as a lot of those MAGA people. And if I don't know who the nominee for governor is going to be in 2022, but I think a lot of us are all going to be in that same boat.
I do.
Oh, is that right? We'll hear after the pod. We'll get the inside scoop. Unless you want to name. Are
You
we
want to?
making-
Are you
no.
announcing?
Are we going
Are
to
you
set a line?
announcing?
No,
Yeah.
I'm definitely not announcing it.
Lloyd for Gov.
Oh,
you could get
no,
recalled from
no,
that
no.
too. You could get like a trifecta.
Yeah, see, that's what I want to do. That's what I want to do. Yeah. I've got money to burn.
Might as well.
Well, let me ask, what's next? What does a 6-month person on the job of the largest county party for the Republicans in the state of Oregon, who's now been recalled, what do you do to further the party's interests, further the candidates that you like, help people get involved? Which is this is a massive thing on our podcast, is we, everybody pays attention to the president and the governor and whatever, but like we got an email 4 or 5 months ago from a woman in Oregon City who says, I want to start getting involved at like county budget meetings or something. It's like, that's amazing. If listening to our podcast made one person do that, it's worth every single hour we've put into this.
Absolutely. So, kind of talking about the future for myself and for the party in general is that I'm not going anywhere. Right? There's too much work to be done. Right? You see a mess, and as we kind of dug into this thing, as we started, turning mattresses over, and we realized that there's a lot of work, a lot of renovation that needs to be done throughout the entire state, both in the county level and also on the state level. So, with that being said, I was approached by the state party, and they asked me to work alongside them for the digital communications for the party, and I accepted that position. And so I'll be doing a little bit of work for them on that, and then also I'm still going to be actively supporting candidates, both running for the gubernatorial election, along with every other candidate that we can shake a stick at. Just because I don't have a feather in my cap doesn't mean that we can't be effective. And actually, the one thing that I learned, so I just want to take a step back and say, I loved being the chairman of the Multnomah County Republican Party. And the reason is because, sometimes when you work for a nonprofit, sometimes when you work for a company, sometimes when you do, other things, it puts your political life in jeopardy in that you can't say who you really are. And I felt like being the chairman of the Multnomah County Republican Party, I felt like I could say, yeah, I'm a Republican, and this is what Republicans are about, and you should be a Republican too, because you don't like paying a lot of taxes, and you don't want, you don't want your parks messed up. You don't want your city messed up. You want your cops to show up when you call them. Like, I loved being the chairman. And what it kind of taught me, though, is that as being the chairman, there's a lot of responsibilities that come with it that, the internal party politics distracts from a lot of the work. And I'm sure anybody who has been in an executive position can kind of understand that. And now I feel like I have an opportunity where I can really drill down and focus on really helping those candidates out. Because the one thing that I've had the really amazing opportunity to do is I've been able to cultivate a really, really great group of individuals. And whether it be in the Young Republicans, whether it be in Multnomah County, these are individuals that, I can call up in the middle of the night and I can say, hey, we got somebody that needs our help tomorrow. Do you remember where you put those signs last month? Well, we need to go pick those signs back up. Like, do you remember this individual? Well, guess what? Now we need to do a speech for them. Now we need to do this, that. The political work doesn't end, and I got to tell you, I feel like I have a little bit more freedom to act independently. And now that the chains are off,
Get ready, Oregon.
now we can kick in the front door and say, all right, it's time to do the work, and let's do this.
Cool. I would just like to say a little call to action here. If you're listening to this podcast and you are not a precinct committee person, I would highly, highly recommend you calling up your local county party and figuring out how to do that. It's the SEL 105. You should have a precinct committee person chair at your local party, and it's just the basic first step toward being more involved in the party. And you can come to these kind of events and vote on things.
And honestly, if that's too much work, email us. We'll figure it out.
Exactly. James at jamesaball.com. Email
There it
me.
is.
We'll
figure
it out for you. But just the Multnomah County Republican Party, because we are so big, is authorized like 1,100 PCPs or something like that, and I think we have like 150. So there's 900 spots unfilled, 1,000 spots almost unfilled, and the vote to recall you was 47 to 36.
Mm-hmm.
That's 11 votes.
Mm-hmm.
If we could get 15, 20, 30 new precinct committee people in this Multnomah County, we could have reversed that. Like that could have not, that whole thing could have not happened.
Or even if you're hardcore conservative, if you're like hate watching us right now and you're like, oh, these rational Republicans, they're not so rational. They're pro this, anti this, whatever. Like, I don't. That's awesome. Still show up. Like if you get involved at your local party level, it takes like 6 people to start showing up and like making a difference at things. It's really, really like at these kind of levels. And like I said, everybody pays attention to president, to governor, to Senate, whatever. At this level, this local level,
it doesn't
5
take
voices.
much.
Yeah.
It is boring.
Well,
The recall thing started at 7 p.m. and ended at 11, and it was a lot of parliamentary nonsense and
I was on the edge of my
speeches,
seat.
and
One person was thrilled.
it was
It was
but-
like reality TV.
right. But it's boring. But I've said this a million times: change is boring. If you want to go down to the Justice Center and throw rocks at police, maybe you'll feel better about yourself, but you're not actually changing anything. If you want to change something, go to your city council meetings. You're getting a little cameo here from Charlie, my dog.
Let's get you on camera.
If you want to make change, go to your city council meetings, go to your neighborhood association meetings, get involved with your county party, learn Robert's rules, read the bylaws. It's boring, but that is how you change things.
And I would just like to speak to the importance of PCPs, because a lot of people believe that PCPs are, they're the lowest rung of the Republican Party. And while it is kind of an entry level into politics, I have to say, the way that the real dynamic of what a PCP is supposed to be is you are an elected representative of your part of your city, your geographical area, to the party. So what you're supposed to be doing is you're supposed to be going out there, talking to the people in your community and say, hey, what should the Republican Party be doing for you? And as you have those conversations and you come to the table and you have that time, you say, hey, we have a real problem with potholes and we want to find a candidate that can help us out with that. And guess what? I know a guy, he's a pastor at a church who's in my area. He would make a great representative. And that's your job as a PCP, to find out what's going on in your community, to be the voice for all of those people in your community to the party. You tell them what they should be doing. That is the whole point of a PCP. And if you want to be able to throw your weight around and tell all of those Republican chair people what they should be doing, this is the opportunity. And one thing that I'm super excited about is, now I'm going to say it, so I got to do it. We're going to be rolling out some training for some statewide PCP training so that we can standardize things across the board, so that when people come to the table, they can see a training agenda that they can go through on YouTube, and they can do it at any time. They don't have to wait for some special meeting or some special book. And we're going to try and get all of those documents, whether you be a House District Captain or whether you be a PCP, those types of jobs, we should be able to say, cut and dry, this is your job, this is your job description, and you should be doing X, Y, and Z every single month. And that way, you hold your Republican Party accountable, and we can do much, much better, more effective work for not only Oregon, but also the people here, so that they can have the best representatives that they possibly can. And that's what the Republican Party should be doing.
Did we just break news on Rational? Did we just?
Yeah,
is this
you sure did. You sure did.
This is a first, I think, for us.
We were this close to having the Attorney General announce on our podcast.
Really bummed.
It didn't work out that way.
But, he didn't run.
He was going to. We were going to.
But we've broken news today.
We've broken news.
May 12th or whatever today is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Here.
Very cool. Well,
so I'm going to need help with some video editing and some really good speakers. So you guys can go ahead, contact James. We'll get you through the pipeline. So
YRO.org, james@jamesaball.com.
Yep.
It's going to be awesome.
That's right.
Going to get good work done.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, we are a little early, but I think that's a really good spot to kind of turn down the podcast. But one of the things we do before we let you go is we always ask our guests the question, who is your favorite Republican?
Well, Thomas Jefferson wasn't a Republican because it wasn't around yet, but Thomas Jefferson was one of the greatest statesmen of all time. And I think that as Americans and as Republicans, you could grow immensely by reading his works and kind of understanding the challenges that were going on in that time in the world.
So I don't know if you heard, but there's this play called Hamilton.
Oh, yeah.
And it does not paint Thomas Jefferson in a super positive light.
Yeah, I totally get it. But at the same time, they wrote that to make money, which is great because I'm happy that they're going more capitalist. Otherwise,
the whole thing falls apart if we try to.
There it is.
Yeah.
You've honestly piqued my curiosity. For the last kind of couple of years, I've been like, oh, TJ, this guy was rough. I'll have to go read a little bit more of what he says.
The thing is like, if you step back and looked objectively at anyone's life, we're all a little rough. There are things that we're not all perfect at, I'm really inspired by not only his works but his words, and so
I think a lot of the founding fathers were just brilliant, and some of the things that they came up with. I mean, still just amazed of the co-equal branches of government and the fact that it's lasted this long. And one of my concerns and critiques of the federal government is the concentration of power in the executive branch. Whether it's Biden or Trump or Obama, the rule by executive order, and the fact that Congress lets them get away with it. But the fact that it's taken 250 years and we're still going strong with this, with Congress, as long as they keep the executive branch in check, do their jobs, and keep going for 250 more years.
So cheers for America.
Yeah, absolutely. So can I give one story?
Yeah, go ahead.
One reason I like Thomas Jefferson so much.
Okay.
So I believe that during the time of right before the Louisiana Purchase, we had this situation where down in Louisiana, the territory was all owned by the French, of course. Mm-hmm. And this was about the same time that Napoleon was marching across Europe and all this stuff, and he was getting his butt handed to him. And Thomas Jefferson was legitimately concerned that maybe Napoleon was going to cross the ocean in order to come to Louisiana because they had this great port down there and march across the United States. And it would have been super easy for them to do that. So Thomas Jefferson was basically working against time in order to send out Lewis and Clark and being like, okay, well, maybe we should totally buy this. And then when they did the Louisiana Purchase, it was an amazing opportunity. But that all it depends on where you stand on westward expansionism and all.
Sure.
And all of that.
It's a very complicated time in U.S. history for sure.
Super exciting stuff.
Interesting.
Good stuff. Here, all we do is argue about Newt Bueller and Kate Brown and stuff today. That was real questions back in the day. Not obviously. I only say that because I think there's a pretty clear choice between Newt Bueller and Kate Brown. It's not much of an argument there. But here. That's we've honestly never gotten Thomas Jefferson as an answer before on that question.
Yeah. Well, I mean, he is not a Republican, so
right?
It's
right.
Kind of outside the.
I non-answered your question. Perfect.
All right. Well, with that, we'll let you go. Stephen, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. And listeners, we will talk to you next time. And viewers. Thanks for listening to the Rational Republican Podcast. Your hosts are James Ball and Nick Perlosky. The show today is brought to you by ProLift Garage Doors of Portland, serving the greater Portland metro area for all your garage door installation and repair needs. If you'd like to get in touch with the show, you can email us at james@jamesaball.com or follow us on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram. You can find our episodes at jamesaball.com, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, or wherever you find your podcasts.